You're listening to Racing Future Radio. Here's your host, Mr. Dennis Mills, with this week's guest, Mr. John Snobelen.
Racing operation in our country, Woodbine.
Yeah.
Formerly the Ontario Jockey Club.
Right.
Founded, I don't know how many, is it 50 years ago that Mr. Taylor first started
that, yeah.
with, yeah. I mean, the vision of that man, can you imagine 700 acres out there 50 years ago, and now it's like a suburb of Toronto.
It's a great gift. If we tried to put together horse racing in Ontario in any real world competitive way without Woodbine, we'd be barking up a tree.
Yeah.
But we've got this great site, close to lots of folks, right on the corridor from the airport to Toronto. We have access to a huge marketplace. It's a great facility. I mean, there's like every other place, it needs investment constantly to keep it that way, but it's a really good fan experience. And we've got a dedicated crew of people there for whom horse racing is in their blood. And they've stepped up. We've asked the folks at Woodbine to step up over the last year and to help us with this alliance, putting these alliance of tracks together, help us with this core racing product. They have done that, and they continue to do that. We want them to focus on growing two things. One is our off-track network, which is important to us, and they've agreed to do that and integrate some new products into that mix, and also to continue to grow the online business. And they've been in that business, as you know, they've been in that space for a long time. So we're relying on them to help us grow the horse industry across the rest of the province.
You talk about their off-track betting system. I'm a supporter of Woodbine, but I find their off-track betting system, with the exception of the one up near Vaughan, I find the one on Bay Street, Turf Club, I find that those venues work against building the sport rather than attracting a new fan base. Is there some way that they could be influenced to sort of clean these places up? They look like little dingy dungeons, you know what I mean?
There's one in my hometown. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But
we're talking about rebuilding the fan base. I don't know if that's the way to rebuild a fan base.
No, I think we recognize that. So here's a couple. There is an opportunity though. If you look at it, off track is really the only gaming that we can do in a hospitality site in Ontario, and it's been underinvested in. There's two reasons for that. One, it's really hard to make any kind of money at it.
But couldn't they have an alliance with sport bars that are already existing?
Absolutely. And if you add another product into the mix, then it becomes much more commercially viable. So, we've looked at instant racing, which is in, I think, 4 states now. It's a pari-mutuel product. It's got an appeal to
folks.
It's
almost like a slot machine, except that you're betting on historical races.
Right. Yeah, it's got a horse piece to it, and you can pool the results, so it's actually a pari-mutuel bet. So we think that product mixed into the right locations with the right investment of capital will help grow grow the industry and grow revenue to the industry and help grow interest in horse racing. So we needed, though, to get a whole series of off-tracks. We had about 50 of these off-track locations, a little more than that, across Ontario, and they ran the scale and product quality from not very good to pretty spectacular. And we looked around the world and said, what do other people do with this? And there's great examples of places where we've got the interface better for a new and more modern client. We've got a much better branded product, so people understand that if they go into, for instance, a Champions Anywhere, it'll look much the same as the last one they were at. Player cards that'll help, with rewards, all that kind of stuff. There's lots and lots of ways of reaching people that we haven't had before. We haven't had the financial need to do that. I think that's part of it. And secondly, we haven't had a second product that we could put in that would help it become financially viable. And instant racing gives us that. And we're really excited about building out that product. We've talked a lot with the folks at Woodbine. They're excited about it. It's going to take a capital investment, and they're ready to make that. And I think this is going to be a big driver of our business out 2 to 3 years.
Oh, I think it's essential that that part of the business improve in terms of the customer experience. And I just become mystified as to how an organization that has leadership that is quite sophisticated, how they could allow it. And, it's an interesting thing. I can remember one time the looking at the program at Woodbine, and all the OTBs were mentioned with the exception of the one on Bay Street. And I remember asking one of the people there, why don't you have the Bay Street OTB mentioned here? And they said, well, we wouldn't want that clientele from the OTB going into the one on Bay Street. And I mean, it seems to me that there's, rather than sort of defending the status quo, there should be a real commitment to renewal. And I mean, I'm happy to see that you're on it, because I think it's critical if we are really serious about rebuilding the fan base.
They say necessity is the father of invention. There's a lot of inventing going on. But you're right. It's probably been under-resourced, under-capitalized. We just haven't focused on it enough. Now we have to. But I think it's important that instant racing product really turns the corner on this. And it really helps us make the investment that needs to be made in order to have off-track sites be more appealing, really, to folks like you and me, and maybe a whole bunch of people who don't yet know how exciting it is.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of an organization like Montana's or some of these other restaurant chains, I can't imagine why they wouldn't want to set aside a corner of their operation for a partnership or a relationship with an organization such as Woodbine.
Sure, and it's obviously a great mix with sports bars. So we've got.
Yeah,
lots of people know more about the market than I do, but clearly there is a bigger and expanded market for this, and clearly that matters to us in the horse racing industry.
Here we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Northern Dancer winning the Kentucky Derby. We're 10 days away from the Kentucky Derby, and 60% of the sort of offspring in Europe right now come out of Northern Dancer. You mentioned earlier how horse racing is a great export, and Northern Dancer is certainly one of the best examples. But I remember when I was a young kid, Mr. E.P. Taylor going to the backstretch kitchen, and from time to time you'd see him in the grandstand walking down where the hot dog stands were. He didn't just park in the trustees' lounge. He really sort of walked around and sort of interfaced with all the fans. And my former employer, boss, friend, Frank Stronach, he's very much the same way. You can see him in the backstretch. You can see him at Clocker's Corner at Santa Anita in the morning. And I think that our leadership in this business has to do a much better job of interfacing with the fan and finding out what the needs of the fan are.
Yeah, and telling our story better to the fans, because we have an awful lot of people, millennials, young people, who really have never been exposed to what it means when there's two hearts going for a finish line. I mean, and Mr. Taylor, Mr. Stronach, people of that magnitude understand the responsibility of having ownership of a great athlete. And, those horses touch thousands and thousands and thousands of people's lives. All of us who've ever owned a horse dream of one day owning a great one. It's a huge responsibility when you do have one, because it's not just your horse. It's really the world's horse. I know those gentlemen embraced that. Again, I think because sometimes we're really proud in this business, and sometimes we're just not boastful. We forget to tell people how important that is and how special it is, and what a gift it is to the next generation. So we have to be able to do better at not keeping this a secret, at letting people know that those great horses change lives.
Well, this leads me to the next question. It has to be another special feature of recommendation in your report, and that is rebuilding the fan base. Now, I'm obsessed with this whole issue of rebuilding the fan base. Talk to us a little bit about how you see that, or how you see it unfolding. Or, I mean, I look at a race on television now, and their cameras are not in focus. You can't hear anything. It's like watching a Charlie Chaplin movie. You don't have any sound or noise. And I think that when you take people and say, hey, I want to watch a race, and they look at a race that is, they can't even see the horse, they're confused. So talk to us a little bit about rebuilding the fan base.
Well, I think we got to start from what's so special about this anyway. As a gaming product, it's a historic gaming product, and there is something about horse racing and gaming that just kind of have always fit together for 2,000 years. But the longer piece of this, the thing that I think is most intriguing to us, is what is there about the horse that's good for us and good for people and good for fans? I mean, we have a generation growing up in virtual reality. And so a sport that involves an animal with heart and with courage, where there's something special that is the difference between winning and second place, that magic, and you've seen it, that magic when you have a horse that's got that kind of heart and that kind of desire, it is good for us to understand it and to watch it and to learn from it. And I think it's inspiring. So when we talk about getting new fans in, it's not just because we want to sell more hot dogs. It's because we want to pass on what's best about our sport to another generation. And maybe some of those people would have an opportunity to get involved and to actually become part of the industry as an owner or as a horse player or as a regular fan. Because there's a special gift that we've all been given if we've been involved with horses, and we need to pass that along, and we need to invite more people to have a better experience at the races so that we can pass that gift that we've been given on. And I think that's something we need to take seriously as a whole generation of horse people and do a better job of inviting people out, providing them with some entertainment, but more importantly, explaining what's really going on in the horse racing side that attracts all of us. It's not just odds. It's not just the wagering. That's part of it. But the special moment is when those horses look at each other and go to that stretch and give it everything. I mean, that's a very special moment.
I think you've described it beautifully, but my question would be, how do you influence track owners to use cameras that are high definition? How do you influence jockeys to put audio and video cams in their helmets so that the fans can feel and hear the energy? I mean, when you watch a hockey game or a basketball game or a baseball game, you can see the sweat, you can can hear the chirping of people back and forth. In our sport of horse racing, that doesn't happen, and I'd like to hear from you. How can you, as the architect of renewal for the sport of horse racing in Canada, how do you feel you can use your position to influence those 8 or 9 tracks that are under your responsibility to do some of these things to get the fan in to see a product that's really competitive with the other sport products that are there?
Well, a couple of things. One, lots of our tracks have made attempts at this, and there's now a change in technology, some of the things you spoke about. I watched a reining from Oklahoma a couple of years ago. They put a hat cam on one of the riders, a great friend of mine. And I watched that video, and it was pretty exciting. And I've shown those things my whole life. I mean, I've been through that arena in Oklahoma City a lot of times, and it was exciting for me to sit and watch, the view from Sean Florida's hat. So imagine what we could do with audio and cams and whatnot in various positions on really bringing the feel and the excitement of a horse race to people. Now, up until now, two things have. First, technically, that hasn't been very possible, and we've got what we've got because we've been dealing with analog technology up until now. So there's a chance to make a change. It's not as expensive as it might have been 5 or 6 years ago. So there's some new possibilities. We have another thing happening right here in this marketplace, in that there's an awful lot of need for content, good sport content, because of the competitive nature of the broadcast and narrowcast industry. So we have some new channels, new availability to get that product out. What we haven't had yet is really a way of monetizing it. So one of the problems is our sport's been basically funded by gaming, and you'll know that racetracks will tell you that they get a new fan out, and the $5 they may or may not wager on a race isn't really going to make much of a difference. There are tracks around North America and as you know, around the world, that have worked really hard at monetizing that fan base. And we know that in the marketplaces that we serve here in Ontario, there's a big enough base of people who would be attracted to this sport if we presented it a little differently, that we could monetize it, that we could make reasonable return by providing a good entertainment product. Part of our job with this new Ontario horse racing industry development arm of the ORC is to actually take on doing some of that and help put the initial capital in, because it's really hard for racetracks to put that capital in and almost impossible for horsemen to. So we've got some work to do along with our partners at Ontario Lottery, at OLG, the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, to do the marketing, find those customers, and invest in making that our product more visually spectacular, and really a better entertainment product.
Well, that sounds really hopeful to me, because I believe that once that modernization of the product for television and for iPad, viewing, once that's done, I think you're going to see a huge growth even in the online gaming side of this sport. John, thank you so much for your support, your dedication, and good luck. Keep it going. Hope to have you back soon.
All right, enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay.
You've been listening to Racing Future Radio with your host, Mr. Dennis Mills. This week's guest was Mr. John Snobelen.